cool. Welcome. Hopefully we're going to have a bit of fun today. We're going to lead you through Docker, what it is, give you guys some practical examples, and I'm going to look at it from a development perspective primarily because I am a dev at heart. In fact, that probably leads me to my first slide. Who the fuck is this guy? Oh, by the way, I'm going to warn you of one thing. I do swear like a trooper, so if you're easily offended, here's the exit. But anyway, carrying on. I'm a senior software engineer at Warren, name your pick. Been around the block a couple of years. Started about 10 years ago in South Africa, of all places. Yes, I am white, in case you're wondering. But anyway, as part of my computer experience, initially started off as a senior trainer at a college in South Africa, in Cape Town, teaching PHP, JavaScript, Perl is my first language, oddly enough, not a nice one to start with. But anyway, moved on to a couple of different areas. From there, left, joined a company called Golang, which for gamers would have been an absolute dream had they survived. However, they have been since bought out and now it's just become a company called Arifco, which I know are based here as well, so you might have encountered them at some point or another. And then eventually headed over to the UK, helped run a little agency over there, and ended up at one of the world's largest independent production music companies, Westwood Music Group, helping manage their website and their infrastructure as well. And after that, did a little bit of charity work with Universal Music, who you may or may not have heard of. You probably heard their music, quite a few movies, ads, and so forth as well. And now, almost recently, having just recently left a company known as Redondo, who are based here in Estonia. I'm sure you guys have probably used their services on a day-to-day basis. Two of my former colleagues are actually sitting up here as well, so it's making me a little bit nervous. But anyway, now having moved on and migrated over to join the OIO group as a senior developer, a couple of things that I'm passionate about, just to give you an idea of what I like to work with apart from Docker. I am primarily a PHP dev. I absolutely adore the Symfony framework, especially the newer version. Likewise, done a fair amount of work with Laravel, likewise the newer versions of Angular as well. And recently, within the last year, I fell in love with a little framework called Phoenix, which is based around a Ruby-like language called Elixir. It's a bit of a niche type thing, so if you guys haven't heard of it, don't stress, but check it out if you do get the opportunity. But yeah, likewise as well, the other big thing that I'm passionate about now, Docker. And obviously that is going to be the focus point today. So moving ahead, one of the first things that I generally get asked by a lot of people, this would just change. What about containers? What do you guys know about containers, by the way? How many of you guys have experience with Docker already, the idea of containerization? Yep.
I thought you were asking a general question.
Anyway. I've actually literally taken it straight from the doc, seeing I'm not really getting a huge amount of response. A container is a standard unit of software that packages up code with all its dependencies so that it can run quickly and reliably from one computing environment to another. That is a very, very critical and vital point. And it is one of the areas that has really changed my life as a developer. I'm going to go on a little bit later about my career path. It might be familiar to some of you who are devs. So hopefully you'll start to get the idea of where things have benefited me over time. But just continuing, the Docker container image is lightweight, standalone, and executable. You guys can obviously read the rest, but just to really summarize it, these are isolated pieces of code or applications. They can be practically anything you want, from web services, databases, cache stores, you name it. But they are isolated, likewise they are lightweight and they are portable. The infrastructure itself helps us to make these small portable little applications that we can bounce around from place to place with ease and with ease of use. So continuing a little bit further, just to give you a little bit of history about the way that I used to work. This might be familiar to some of you, so hopefully we'll all be on the same page. If not, hopefully it should become a little bit clearer. But when I first started off developing, and this might sound familiar, I would normally have to locally install all the dependencies to start off a particular application, be it Ruby, be it PHP, whatever it might be. So now that's about a day wasted. I've got to go and set up, back in the day, we used to use Apache. I've got to get MySQL installed. I've got to get PHP version, whatever it might have been at the time, installed. Let's throw another further spanner into the work. I now get a new project from client XYZ. I'm now going to go and spend time on their services setting up the exact same environments. That's another day wasted. Worst case yet, I'm sure you guys are probably pretty familiar that most projects in these days especially are going to have something like the dev, stage, possibly even a pre-live and a live environment. You can imagine the amount of time that gets wasted having to set all that up. It was frustrating because as a developer, the first thing that I want to do is code. I don't want to sit around fucking around setting up services. That's not my area. That's for the sysadmin. That's for the DevOps guys. I want to write constructive code and be as productive as possible, as quickly as possible. So anyway, a lot of time got wasted. Oh, sorry, just to take it a little bit further. Get a new machine. I did happen once. My laptop crashed. Go through the process all over again. Likewise, take it a little bit further, get a new project, fine. This new project now means PHP 7, not PHP 5.6. Sure, Windows offers things like WAMP and so forth, which do allow you to kind of switch between things, but it's a pain in the ass. Likewise, I don't know how you guys feel about having multiple apps installed on your phones. I'm pretty much the same way with my Mac. I have minimal apps installed on both phone, likewise my Mac. So having all of these different things, having Postgres, having MySQL, having multiple versions of PHP became a pain in the ass. Anyway, eventually I discovered a little thing called virtual machines, or actually better worded, Vagrant, which really runs as a virtual machine through things like VirtualBox from Oracle, VMware and so forth. And I thought it was pretty neat. You get these nice little built-in through images, or you can build them yourself, and they can produce pretty much anything you want. In fact, to give you one example, Laravel still packages a Vagrant box known as Homestead. And Homestead will come packaged with everything from Postgres to MySQL to PHP, Nginx, Apache, pretty much everything that a Laravel developer could possibly want in order to develop. Not too bad, but it had a couple of problems. One, it's a virtual machine that is sitting on top of your host operating system. Now, I don't know if any of you guys have actually used anything like Vagrants and VirtualBox machines. They are pretty expensive on resources. They suck up resources like you cannot believe. Likewise, other big problem, if I needed to change a single line in my build, I had to rebuild everything. So you could literally go and grab about 4 or 5 cups of coffee and it will probably still be building. Again, coming back to my previous point, I want to be as constructive as quickly as possible. I don't want to be waiting while this build happens. I could theoretically develop on the fly and hope like hell it works, but I would rather wait for that build to be ready, get back to my development and make sure that my environment is up to scratch. So again, just time wasting. Likewise, I found them fairly difficult to share as well, especially amongst other developers. So this leads me to where I am today. A little while back I discovered Docker, and likewise the idea of the container environment. And I've got to say, it has completely revolutionized and changed the way that I develop and the way that I work. The guys at Redango, my former colleagues, will probably know that I pushed and pushed and pushed to try and get as many of the devs as possible onto the Docker environment. When I joined Word, the first thing that I did was move all of their projects that we're currently working with over to Docker as well, so that we can try and get a unique development workload. Yes?
It sounds like it was very difficult, considering all these benefits. Why did you find it difficult getting your co-workers on board?
I think it comes down to many things. The general idea, I suppose, is already going to be the idea that people sometimes just have an idea of problem with adapting to new ideas. That's generally one of the things that I've had over time. Likewise, obviously, there's so many things that are in flux constantly at the same time as well. So it's just another tool, it's another gimmick. It's going to fade away in a couple of years. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But it generally happens to be just a general hesitance to change. I've encountered it not necessarily with Redungo, I've had it with many people with different ideas as well. Hey, let's try this language instead. People don't want to do it. They're used to certain things, they're stuck in their way and so forth. But anyway, moving back onto Docker, it has completely revolutionized the way that I work. And as I said, I've spent the last couple of months with Hoya moving their projects over to a Docker environment because they were working the way that I first started to work, where everything was locally installed. So now we'll pretty much find me through that process, although any dev will know, especially a senior type dev, will probably be familiar with the idea of, you're always fine-tuning things. And I'm always constantly trying to find ways to fine-tune my Docker images. But at the same time, I find it kind of fun, kind of nerd out on it at the same time, so I'm quite happy to do so. But let's carry on. So, looking at it from a personal perspective, what's in it for me? Because this is one of the first questions that I normally get asked by most businesses and likewise other developers as well. What the fuck is the benefit? What am I going to get out of it? And here are the benefits that I've got. First, reduce time onboarding admins and devs. You join a company that has a complex environment, and I've been through a few. You have a week of onboarding, trying to get people set up, and people are working remotely, this person's at a meeting, people are unreachable, people just don't want to help, whatever the reason might be, and now you've got to try and pick through all these configuration files, services, vice versa. It's a lot easier, especially when you start looking at things like Docker Compose, which we'll get onto a little bit later. It becomes a lot easier to just set up an environment, get the guys set up with Docker, get them set up with the Docker environment, and they can be up and running within a couple of minutes, at most an hour or so. In fact, just to give you a little bit of a benchmark, one of my first tasks with Hoya was to set up 3 virtual machines with containers for one of their projects. I got all 3 up within 3 hours. I took the time to get the first Docker environment up and running. After that, pretty smooth sailing. I'm sure you guys are going to agree that's substantially more productive than the old-fashioned way of, okay, I'm now going to go through, log into SSH into my machine, install Nginx, install MySQL, secure the box, and so forth. My next point, reduce setup time. Well, I've already pretty much covered that up as well, creating new environments. I can literally take, because of its infrastructure and its portability, I almost have a guarantee that I can move it from place to place and bounce it around. Once you know that it works, it's probably going to work pretty much everywhere you put it. And that's, in fact, let's come back to it. How many devs are in here actually? How many of you guys have ever encountered the "well, it works on my machine" scenario? Pretty much every one of us, myself included. At least with something like a Docker container, you're running the same environment on everyone's machine, be it Mac OS, be it Linux, be it Windows. So you have it almost guaranteed that, yeah, you're not going to encounter that kind of problem again. At least provided, obviously, your containers are set up properly and you're following certain practices. Certain things that we can probably touch on a bit later, but at least I've managed to drastically reduce that problem. I know that because my development environment is an exact replica of what I have running on my virtual machine or my containers in production dev at stage, I know that it's probably going to run in exactly the same way. Likewise, actually coming back to that, I've encountered an environment before as well, coming back to that idea of dev, stage, and production servers. And at times, companies will maybe have, let's say, dev running Ubuntu, stage is running CentOS, and then production Alpine Linux. Well, actually, Alpine's probably not a very good example. But there's already big differences between CentOS and Ubuntu. So already we start to have configuration problems between those environments. So you end up spending so much time debugging, trying to figure out the different problems. Again, you have a single environment that you deploy to all of these different machines, and as you develop an environment, you're going to save a heck of a lot of time. You have a far more reassurance that things are going to start working for you. And then obviously, as my last point, there's going to be money saved. And I think from every company's perspective, that's always going to be a huge benefit. If you think about it, let's come back to the idea of having to go waste a couple of days onboarding a dev. That's money wasted because that dev is not being productive. He's not developing code that we can push out an application. At the same time, debugging different server environments that differ between each other. It's time wasted. It's money lost. So those are the benefits that I found from me. There's going to be another slide later that'll probably back that up, and that I actually took almost verbatim from Docker. That will kind of reaffirm pretty much what I felt the gut instinct right from the word go anyway. But alright, cracking on. This thing is not liking me today. Right, let's get an overview of Docker. How much do you guys know about Docker at this particular point? A little bit? Have you guys played with it at all? Any of you guys work with it on a daily basis? That part's a little video, guys. Okay, so just to summarize what it really is at the end of the day, we have an open platform for developing, shipping, and running applications. I love that summary right off. I can develop with it, I can ship, and I can deploy it pretty much anywhere I feel like. Likewise, it's an open platform, so it's not like we're going to have to go and pay extortionate amounts of money. Carrying on, it allows you to separate your applications from your infrastructure. Coming back to that, it works in my machine scenario, and likewise, dev was different to staging. Because we have the same environments every single time, all I have to do is focus on the application itself. The infrastructure can be pretty irrelevant. It's flexible enough that it will counter or handle most scenarios for us. Likewise, again, because of the drastically reduced time to get up and running, we have the ability to develop and deliver software far quicker. And I'm sure any dev in here will probably want to agree, it's frustrating spending time setting things up. It's frustrating having to debug some arbitrary thing in some system or some service that you have minimal knowledge about because you're not a network admin or you're not a sysadmin. Likewise, obviously, actually coming back, sorry, to my final point, rather, we have the ability to reduce that delay between writing code and actually running it in production. We're not going to go too far into a couple of these points today. Obviously, we have limited time to do so, but I can give you a couple of scenarios and just as a general workflow. You have the ability, for example, to develop your code, push up your container to something like GitLab or maybe Jenkins. Jenkins runs your tests, test pass, awesome. It pushes up, builds up your latest build and deploys it to your server. It immediately reduces time. I don't even have to manually do a whole heck of a lot other than push up the latest change. Alright, carrying on a little bit more, obviously we're going to be talking a fair amount. At a later point we are going to start getting a little bit more hands-on, but obviously right now I really just want to break down the different components that we have some idea of it. So the Docker engine itself is, and I'm sure you're all familiar with what client-server is by now, but it's the client-server architecture made up of the following components. We have a server known as the Docker daemon, which obviously just listens to commands. And obviously, once it receives them, hopefully manages to successfully execute them. We have a REST API that sits in between. I'm sure most of you guys are familiar with what a REST API is by now. So we have a REST API in between that allows the communication with the daemon. And then likewise, a command-line interface, or CLI as we like to call it, which provides us with the Docker commands, and likewise, obviously, if you're smart, you'll have Docker Compose as well, and that we use to interact with the actual Docker daemon. So to have a look at our little diagram over here, if you have a look at our different containers, we have our networks, our images, our volumes. Down in the center, we've got our daemon, overlaid with that, the API, and we're just going to start using CLI commands to say, I need to run this, I need to deploy that, I need to build that, tag that. And all that those commands are doing is pushing through to the API, and the daemon will do all the heavy work for us. So what can it be used for? This is where I come back to that idea of what were the benefits for me? And this is where I come back to this idea of, this is not taken almost verbatim from Docker themselves. Bit of a shameless plug, not that I am actually a Docker employee, but I stand by this as well, because it really does reaffirm what I do strongly believe. We have fast and consistent delivery of applications. Definitely. I've already mentioned this streamline my development process rapidly. I don't have to waste time for vagrant builds. I don't have to waste time setting up standalone machines or having to worry about PHP versions anymore or Ruby versions or whatever it might be. Likewise, responsive deployment and scaling. It is extremely portable. Likewise, extremely scalable at the same time. It works beautifully within this type of environment. And likewise, we have the ability, because it is so lightweight, we have the ability to run even more workloads on less hardware. That also comes back to that idea of saving money. Obviously, fine, hardware is getting cheap these days, but at the same time, the more we can run on one machine, the better it's going to be for us. Or one virtual machine, the better it's going to be for us. Alright, so coming back a little bit further, let's start talking about its architecture. We've had a look at the general engine. We've had a look at some of its benefits directly from Docker, but we're now going to have a look at the architecture itself. There are a couple of little things that really make up Docker that we kind of need to understand. I'm not going to go into massive details of all of them. That will probably be a workshop on its own. In fact, sorry, let me just interject quickly. This is hopefully going to be the first of many workshops. We've had several questions that have been posted to us as well. Obviously, we do not have enough time in one single day to cover every single topic. So what I would suggest, what we have suggested, is that we'll have a survey at the end of the day. If you guys want to look at Docker networking in more detail, or you want to look at run commands, all three of the commands, or Docker files in more detail, send them the survey, we'll make a plan from there. And anyway, coming back to the architecture. So these are the components that really make up this client server architecture that I've been talking about. Firstly, again, we've got that Docker daemon. He's the one that does all the heavy lifting. We send instruction via that REST API that I mentioned using the CLI. And the Docker daemon will do things like running our application, building it, tagging it, whatever else it might be. So he's really the big boy, the guts behind everything. Likewise, obviously, we've got the Docker client, and that's what we use to interact with our Docker daemon. Likewise, we then also have the three Docker registries and Docker objects. Coming back to registries quickly, a registry is kind of like a Git repository. It's just a place to store built-up images. Any of you guys been onto Docker Hub? That's an example of a registry. There are, to my knowledge, at least three main registries that you can really consider. There's Docker Hub, which is the one that most of you should get familiar with. You also have the ability to run what's known as the Docker Trusted Registry. That is commercial though. Can be kind of costly, but it does come with certain support benefits and so forth as well. But it is a self-hosted registry. If you don't want to push things up directly to Docker Hub, in fact I can get into that more detail fairly soon as to why you might not want to, but let's say for security reasons or personal reasons you want to host your own registry, you have BTR, or lastly just the general private registry, which is the community edition. So it doesn't come with the full-blown support, but it is free, it's pretty easy to set up and get set up and running. In fact, for sanity's sake, and just to give you guys an example, I went and set up a private registry last night. I just demo purposes ready. Actually, in reality, it looks nothing like that. I added a nice little UI over it that was available on GitHub. In reality, the registry itself just spits out JSON data. But yeah, we have a little bit of syntactic sugar here. And literally, as I was mentioning before, just gives you the ability to start storing your images. Obviously, then other developers can pull them, and likewise, you can pull them, push them, deploy them to multiple different locations. So we have our registries, and then likewise, more importantly, and last but not least, should I say, we have our Docker objects. And objects now being things like volumes, networks, containers, and images. And these are probably the more fun parts to work with Docker. And probably what you guys will probably spend more time umming and ahhing about, and especially if you're like me, fine-tweaking and fine-tuning until you find that optimal piece, which of course you never really fully achieve. But moving on then, just to start giving you guys some summaries about what these things are, just to start breaking them down. But there were 2 points that I really used to confuse when I first started off. What's the difference between the image and what's the difference between a container? So an image, at the end of the day, is really just a template of instructions on how to build up a container. It's based off, in most cases, a base image. You can also roll out your own, although best practice generally dictates try find one that's already pre-built by a trusted vendor. But at the end of the day, it's a series of instructions that says, look, when I build up my container, I need you to do this and this and this. I need you to install Nginx. I need you to install Apache or MySQL, Postgres, Percona, whatever it might be. I need you to copy over these files. I need you to set these user permissions, add these users, and so forth. So it's just instructions on how the container itself needs to get up and running. My last 2 points are probably 2 of my favorite things about Docker, where it really starts to digress from something like Vagrant. I mentioned previously that when working with Vagrant, if you made a single change, and you start rebuilding, you might as well go grab coffee, go grab lunch, hell, go home, come back, and it's probably still going to be building. And that's just because of the way it's built, because of its architecture. However, Docker images build up layers. And here's the beauty. When you make changes to your Docker file, it will analyze the changes that have been made, and it will say, well, okay, there's layer here, layer here, layer here, layer here. Only that layer's changed. So that's the only one that I have to rebuild. It creates this little cache with all the different layers that it's made up. And all that it'll do is say, well, from the bottom down, or wherever I am down, I need to rebuild those. So we can talk a little bit later about certain best practices about how to arrange Docker files. But the general idea is only what needs to change will change and will be rebuilt. Likewise as well, things are cached. You'll notice the first time you build an image, it's pretty quick to begin with, handled quicker than Vagrant. But subsequent changes are almost lightning fast. It's actually kind of intimidating in a way, because I used to kind of give off being lazy. Say, well, I'm building up my Vagrant image, I've got nothing to do now. Go grab my coffee. Make a change to a Docker image, depending on how big the change is. I don't have that option. It's going to be up and ready in a few seconds, obviously depending on the image. So right, from the image, we get the container. And then, as I said, this was the bit that I always used to get confused, which is which. But the image is the template to say, this is how you're going to build up the container. Now the container is the actual runnable, executable portion that comes from the actual image. So we provided these instructions that tell us, look, when I launch my container, you're going to do this and this and this. What a container is basically any that you pretty much want. You can have a container for a MySQL database, you can have a MySQL container for an Nginx web server, for Redis, you can have all of them combined if you want. I wouldn't recommend it. But pretty much any executable application, and it allows us to come back to one of those first slides that I had, where I spoke about, or basically took these from Docker themselves, and spoke about the idea of isolated single applications. So now I have the ability to go and create these containers. One's literally handling my database. One's literally handling my web service. Think about that and take that back to Vagrant, actually, where when I spoke about Homestead, it had everything bundled into it. And I just wanted to go and change my web server. Unfortunately, it's still going to rebuild my MySQL database and the Postgres and whatever else. At least now, if I separated my containers and only did the different layers of changing, my build time is again rapidly reduced. But anyway, coming back and continuing further, so the containers themselves are the runnable instances of images. We can create, start, stop, move, delete. As I mentioned before, they are incredibly portable, little pieces through little applications. Likewise, we can connect them to one another. They can communicate pretty nicely. In fact, very, very nicely. We'll get onto that a little bit more later, at least in some detail. They are likewise relatively well isolated from one another. You can isolate them pretty well, although in general, there's a relative little bit of isolation. Likewise, they are defined by its image and any configuration options you provide when you create or started. We'll start chatting a little bit later about the idea of build arguments and likewise environment variables, and how we can actually dynamically start creating things like I need PHP 7.1 versus 7.3. I can literally pass in a build argument or environment variable. Well, actually, it would be a build argument in that case. And it will dynamically build itself up to become the next image. It's an incredibly flexible system to work with. And likewise, the last point, by the way, and this is something I have learned one too many times, a container will lose any data inside it or any changes if it is destroyed. Give you a little example, put myself on the chopping block here. Had a MySQL container, forgot to map a volume to say that, yeah, there's going to be persistent storage that is persistent on my host machine, aka my Mac. Rebuilt the MySQL database, and guess what happened to my data? All gone. Had to start re-importing and rebuilding everything. Thankfully, it was just my machine. It wasn't the production machine. So just a very, very, very important point to know. When we do start getting into the more practical side of things, make sure you manage your data correctly. We'll talk about different ways that we can start doing that fairly soon as well.
Question.
Yep.
Tell us things that isolation level can do.
Yeah.
In previous slide.
How much?
Can you describe more what you mean? What kind of isolation can do? Isolation levels can be controlled.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of the best way to describe it.
Because again, security background, we want to know how.
Okay, for a security background. They're a little bit less secure than a Vagrant box because they are integrated within the host machine itself. So there have been known to be problems where, yeah, you do have security malicious code, especially on the Linux boxes, as far as I know.
But you can control the
You can control it. So.
Maybe it's a networking, maybe it's a disk, maybe I don't know. What kind of isolation I can control?
You can control the permissions, you can control the networking isolation, its availability within the network, literally where it sits, what ports are exposed. You can pretty much isolate it completely from pretty much everything. The big thing that I would really point out is that, yeah, especially on any Linux machine, because of the way that it is integrated within the OS itself as part of the architecture. There have been issues where people are running containers as root, and obviously there's malicious code, things get leaked out, and then things do start going haywire. But moving on to one of our next objects. Wait. Networks. I'm not going to spend a huge time on this. This in itself could be a day or two worth of workshops. It's like a pretty complex area, but Docker does give us the ability to start defining our own little virtual networks, if you wish, within your own machine. That's the simplest example that we could talk about, the idea of the bridge network, but likewise we have the ability to obviously network between Docker containers running on different virtual machines isolated across through wherever it might be across the world. There are different types of drivers. The simplest that we will work with, and the one that we'll work with today as an example, is the bridge. And it really just literally creates a bridge between your host machine, aka your Mac or your Windows machine, and the Docker environment, that you can start exposing certain services and making them available, or isolating them and placing them in the background. But through the networks and the control them themselves, we have the ability to start exposing ports and publishing ports. I always used to get these two confused. Expose versus publish. Exposed really just gives the ability for containers to talk to one another within the network. So for HTTP, you may, or through, let's say for Nginx or Apache, you might expose port 80 and port 443. Whereas publish, actually in a bridge network, makes it publicly available. So there is a subtle difference. Expose, if you simply expose 80 and 843 and A8443, try and load it up in your browser, it's not going to be available because it hasn't been opened up to the actual host. When you decide to publish it, that's when you have the ability to start actually seeing it and seeing, now, okay, I now have a web service running on port 80 and port 443 on my actual host machine or virtual machine, depending on where it might be. One of the beauties, though, of Docker networks is just how much it does behind the scenes. Things like IP tables, IP address allocation, you name it, it's all handled by the Docker daemon for you. Likewise, there's one nifty little feature that I absolutely love, and you could almost call it dynamic DNS. Whenever you start creating containers and you start giving them names, when containers need to start communicating with one another, all you need to do is reference the container by its name. Let's say I have a container called Redis. I need to connect to Redis. I literally would use Redis :6379 rather than an IP address or some made-up domain name that I've had to go register. But Docker is doing all of that in the background for you. As I said, the networks themselves could be an entire day or two worth of conferencing. It is a pretty complex issue. Some of the PILW-IO guys in the back here probably have far more knowledge than I do. If you guys do have deeper questions later, we are on Slack, and likewise they are around unavailable as well if you guys do want to discuss in more detail. But continuing, the last major object that we need to start considering, and this comes back to my previous example, is managing your data. As I mentioned, changes to data inside containers do not persist, at least by nature, after you destroy or rebuild that container. So that comes back to my idea of MySQL previously. I got MySQL through a container running, had all my data, forgotten to manage it, rebuilt it, lost everything, and had to go and re-import and start from scratch. So here we're going to have a look at just a couple of points about it. As I mentioned, it doesn't persist. Likewise, its writable layer is pretty tightly coupled with its host machine, through where the container is running, and likewise, writing to its layer reduces performance in comparison to data volume. So from a performance perspective, and likewise with managing the data, every time Docker itself is internally writing directly to the container, you're reducing your performance. by its very, very nature, because they want you to manage data using things like volumes and perhaps bind mounts, as we'll get onto fairly soon, we have an immediate performance increase. So coming on to from a developer's perspective, by the way, there is one additional that I've left out. I personally never actually use it. But the two main options that we will have for managing data are volumes and likewise bind mounts. When we get into the practical examples, I will start showing you guys examples of both of them. I have one practical, you will literally see both a bind mount and a volume in action at any given time. This is to give you a little bit of background, touching on the basics of it. Volumes themselves are stored on the host system and managed by Docker itself. So all that it's doing is saying, well, rather than write to the container, shove it on the host. Therefore, at least unless your host dies, God help you if it does, but if the host dies, which doesn't die, the data doesn't die. Look, you can accidentally delete volumes. I do it from time to time, actually on purpose. But the general idea is you can keep rebuilding that container over and over and over, and you will persist. Your data will continue to persist. Better idea yet, especially when you consider the storage options that you have available. The simplest being a file system storage, where it will take somewhere like SSD. You also have options for things like S3 storage. They're fantastic. I've got S3 storage over here. I decided to move my data or my MySQL container from this machine to that machine. Sure, do it. Just remap it back to the same S3 storage. The data is still going to persist. Whereas if I literally not manage that data and move it from machine A to machine B and rebuilt it, it's gone. And again, I'm back to square one. Anyway, continuing a little bit further, just as another little point as well, they are, as I mentioned, the vet author, as it mentions, the best way to persist your data. And likewise as well, just two last little points. You have the ability to create what you call anonymous volumes and likewise named volumes. I personally prefer named volumes. An anonymous volume is as what it says it is. You don't give it a name. The Docker will dynamically create some hash type name that actually references, okay, yes, my MySQL data was stored here, or my HTML data was stored over here. I prefer to literally name my volume and say, it's MariaDB, or Kona, or MySQL, or Postgres, or whatever it might be. Then obviously when you start inspecting things, you can actually see, okay, I know which one happens to be which. You've also got bind mounts, which I generally use, and I recommend developers use, especially in the development environment, or the development setup. And this allows us to literally mount a physical file or folder on the host system and have it available within the container. So I'll give you an example. As a developer, let's say I got my source code, and I'm developing a Symfony application. Sorry. Rather than having to remap my data and rebuild my data and push it into a volume every single time I make a change, I create a bind mount. And all that it says is, well, fine, this directory here, let's say my folder is development/Symfony projects. I have development/Symfony project to var www.html on my container. If I look inside that actual container, I will see my host code inside it. The beauty is, as you make changes to that host code, it's generally immediately propagated directly to within the container as well. So it's ideal for a development environment. It's not really ideal for production, but from a developer's perspective, fantastic. And that's generally the way that I work, although you'll generally find us using what you would consider development and production type tools at the same time as well. Right.
So for clarification, volumes are preferred for production environment?
You can use them for development as well.
Just wanted to know which is the preferred for...
Okay, in fact, let me reword that time. For things like code, I prefer bind mounts for development environments. But for things like persistent data like MySQL data, I would rather use a volume, even in a developed environment. Again, just to reduce that possibility that I accidentally lose all my MySQL data. But yeah, from a production perspective, volumes are probably the best way to go. You could use a byte count, but it's not really that practical. Likewise, there is especially in a Mac environment, by the way, there is a performance reduction when using byte counts, because obviously there has to be this write between the host to the container. So better performance using volumes, and likewise better persistence at the end of the day. Likewise, just coming back to this idea of containers, and likewise coming back to already images and containers, they're all built around the idea of a Docker file. Now, I'm going to be honest, for the past couple of days, I really wanted to include how to write a Docker file. But the reality is, we would be here well past 2 p.m. Likewise as well, there are so many little intricacies and ins and outs that it's almost impossible to cover all of it. So at the end of the day, I'm going to give you guys a summary, and then I'll go online quickly and I'll show you run through a couple of the main commands that you might look at. My best recommendation in the way that I learned to write Docker files is look at Docker files. A lot of the official repositories that you will find on places like Docker Hub may or may not provide a Docker file within the repository that you can actually view. And that's what I actually use as my learning tool. When I started getting into Docker, I did a course in Udemy. And I said, yeah, this is a Docker file, that's it. And then I spent most of my time just from trial and error, reading through articles, and just kind of fucking things up and breaking them, and finally figuring out the best way to start doing things. So, continuing, just going through it, as mentioned, our images themselves are built up from instructions. So the instructions are provided via the actual Docker file itself. They use a pretty simple syntax, at least I think so. In fact, how many of you guys are familiar with shell scripting? Nice. And a few of us, I'm actually relatively new and pretty shit with it, but at least I can kind of get around. It kind of reminds me of shell scripting to a certain degree, because there are certain things that you can do with the Docker files that really do replicate shell scripting as well. But the syntax is pretty simple. What an instruction might look like. We've got a little comment, and then likewise, the instructions themselves generally written by convention in uppercase to tell you which type of instruction you are running, and then after that, the actual instruction that needs to be run. Continuing further, just like any programming language or any programming file, be it a class or be it an old bash script, if you will, Perl script, they are interpreted line by line. Obviously, it kind of makes sense. It's not going to start from the bottom and work its way up. But that's where it starts building up these layers. It starts looking at these different instructions. The copy commands, the run commands, as, so forth, the CMDs and the entry points. And it starts building up its different layers. And that's where it comes down to that idea that when you make a change to any of the instructions, depending on where the change happens to be, it just looks at that particular instruction and then just has to build its way down from there onwards, thereby hopefully saving us a bit of time. I'll come back to that point a little bit later on as well. But just to give you guys some examples, and as I mentioned, I already spent a lot of time trying to figure out the best way to get you guys to write a Docker file. But with too many people here, likewise, trying to give one one that will be practical for everyone's use case. Some people being Python developers, or Ruby developers, JavaScript developers, some being sysadmins, network admins, whatever it might be. Trying to provide a general use case for everyone, it wasn't going to be practical. And likewise, there are a heck of a lot of commands to look at, and likewise, so many little intricacies that it would just take forever for me to get through. But what I have opened up is some of the official Docker images. I'm going to go through a couple of the main ones for you, and just give you a quick glossy overview of what they can do. The docs are available, these slides will be available for you guys later on as well. I will add one more before it's published with some other useful links at the same time. But right, the very, very first command that we can actually see there is from. And I mentioned previously that images are normally built of base images. The from image allows you to define what that base image might be. Now let's go and have a look at it quickly. So from image, and then likewise there's some additional syntax as well. So I could say something like from Ubuntu 18 point whatever it happens to be now. And that will be the base to start off your actual image. But that is generally going to be your starting point. It is probably going to be, in fact, possibly the most critical command you could actually start off with. Because obviously you need to start with somewhere. And especially if we want to go and create a consistent platform that can be portable and moved, or through a consistent environment that can be moved, we need to start from a consistent base. So the from command gives us the ability to start building from a base image. By the way, coming back to just the idea of best practice, try where possible to use an official base image. I kind of do like to tweak every now and again and build my own base images. Sometimes you do need to, because the official image just doesn't quite do things exactly the way that you want. But you'll save yourself far more time, sweat, and energy just by having a look online at Docker Hub. There are images for practically everything you could possibly wish for. But that's from. Moving on. Run. I love this one. Run. Literally kind of does what it says. It runs a command or runs and executes some code when building up the image. In fact, that's an important little thing to note. Let's say, given a hypothetical situation here, I'm building up this image and I need to go change file permissions. How am I going to do that? I use the run command. Run chow-r www-data :www-data. When I build up that image, it's going to hit that instruction and say, okay, here's a command that I need to execute, so run it. And then continuing, and likewise on the run, you can have multiple of these run statements throughout the Docker file. I would, however, as mentioned, not have too many. I will come back to at a later point some best practices if you do start writing your own Docker files, and likewise ways to spot shit Docker files. Continuing a little bit further, we also have the command that's generally, and well, you don't necessarily have to have it, but it's generally pretty nice to have. It literally provides a command as a starting point to start executing the actual container when it's up and running. So it might be something as simple as PHP FPM to make sure that the PHP FPM service is up and running when you bring the container up. It might just be as simple as bin/bash so that you launch into a bash environment. So yeah, it's literally just giving you the option to provide a single command. In fact, it can do other things as well. I'll dive into those briefly. But it gives you the option, at its simplest, to provide a single command to start launching up that container and to get it to start doing what it needs to do or what you intended to do. It can also, as well, we'll get onto entry points fairly soon as well. It can also be used to provide default arguments to an entry point script or the entry point, if none are provided. In fact, I might as well dive into that quickly. The entry point allows us to pretty much create an executable binary type container. One of the things that I've had with commands especially is it becomes a pain in the ass if you need to run multiple commands at any given time. Trying to wire up a whole bunch of commands that need to be executed simultaneously becomes something of a bitch. So you can now start creating an entry point scripts, either a shell script, it can also be provided by various different syntaxes. And the entry point functions pretty similar to the command, but allows us to execute multiple commands at the same time. Again, if the command option was provided, and by the way, there can only be one. If the command option is provided, it will be used or can be used to provide default arguments to your entry points if none happen to be provided. Continuing further, just jumping back a tiny bit, have a look at expose. I spoke earlier about the idea of networking, and we spoke about expose and likewise publish. The expose command gives you the ability to start providing or exposing ports to other containers within its network. If you have a look at its syntax, they're giving you an example of, well, two different variants there. You have the ability to expose not only the port, but the protocol as well. I generally just expose the port because it will default to TCP. So for an example, if I'm building up a web server, expose 80, it will use TCP as the transport protocol to begin with. Likewise, you could also add things like expose 80 space 443 to expose both 80 and 443 simultaneously. So as I mentioned previously, that gives you the ability to expose that container to other containers for communication. It comes back to our discussion earlier about isolation. Without exposing any points, there is no other way for these containers to communicate with one another. So we need to expose ports, but it doesn't necessarily make it available to the host, just internally, so that the containers themselves can communicate. Alright, jumping around a little bit. The user allows us to switch between a particular user for any consecutive instructions that may need to run thereafter. For example, you'll generally start off with root, and then maybe by the end of it, or run as root, you need to go copy over your files, change your file permissions, maybe add some additional software. So you want to do that as root. And then at the end of the day, maybe you want to go and switch over to your node user or www data user. So the general point behind it literally just allows, it's the equivalent of Linux, or Linux is SU, or SU command. It allows you to specify the user that you wish to execute the next bunch of commands from. Another one that we should probably start looking at is the working dir, or work dir. The working dir just allows us to specify a current working directory within the container. Quite often, I want to, in fact, I can give you two use cases for this here, and again, when we get into the practical examples, we'll start looking at this in more detail. But it allows us to specify a directory. Let's say I'm building up a web server by default. Apache wants var www.html. So I can specify work there var www.html. If that directory doesn't already exist in the container, it will create it. It will then change into it, and any operations like copying files and so forth, or changing file permissions, happen inside through this particular directory. It also obviously gives us a point, if we need to execute into our container, the ability to literally start off in a particular directory. Coming back and jumping back and forth, the last two I'm going to cover are the ARG and the ENV. Right, I mentioned this idea that containers or images themselves can be pretty dynamic, likewise containers as well. There may be time, let's say I'm developing a single image and I'm developing a PHP image. Now, I might want to install Xdebug for debugging purposes on my commands. So I can use an argument to define install Xdebug, true or false. When it hits the right command, we can evaluate that argument and say, oh, okay, yes, I've said for development purposes, I'm going to install Xdebug, so we'll do it. If I then want to do a production build, I set it to false, it'll build up an entirely new image without Xdebug. So it just gives us the ability to dynamically control the build environment. ENV works slightly differently. ENV provides us with environment variables. I generally use these to dynamically control things when the container is actually up and running. How many of you guys use environment variables within your scripts or programs already? Probably all seen env files in the past, especially if you've been in a PHP environment. Environment variables work pretty much the same way. They give you the ability to dynamically start changing certain aspects of the way that the container itself is actually running. I'll give you an example of something that I did recently. I needed to set up and be able to port certain containers between multiple projects, all based on the same code base. But I got sick and tired of having to edit my Apache vhost every single time, change things like the server name, the log directory, and so forth. So I managed to map in environment variables for things like the server name, the port, or whatever else it might be. It gets passed into the container, it gets passed to Apache, and it would dynamically allow me on the fly, maybe, or at least on restart, change things like the server name or whatever command or environment you wish to control. But there is a subtle difference between them. There are further intricacies as well. But at the end of the day, two vital points that we should definitely consider. In fact, there's one more I want to look at. One build. I love this. One of the newer versions of Docker, I can't remember exactly which, finally brought us the ability to bring out multi-stage builds. This is awesome. I'll talk about them in more detail later. But the on-build command, if you start building up with a parent image, says, well, fine, when a child is based off this image, run the command, or copy the file. Quite a nice little space saver. I personally, in fact, just to crack the joke, size does matter in Docker, and it's not what we think, the smaller is the better. So one way to keep your parent image nice and small is to use things like on-build. Then only when a child takes from the parent, or to use the parent as the base, it will execute the run command or the copy command and so forth, thereby reducing size, but obviously still passing the ability to the child through arguments as well.
So, I had a question regarding the work directory.
Yeah.
The work directory, is that the start of starting to store data on that container image?
Amongst other things, yes. You can copy data into it. You may need to change into a particular directory to modify certain files. Probably would need to, but it's probably more for where you would want to probably copy the directories, and then likewise have literally a working directory for your container to be able to run inside. For example, if you were going to have an Apache type or Nginx type of environment, you kind of want your container to launch up where your web files are stored. So you'll copy them into your working directory via www.html. And then likewise when that container launches, obviously we have everything in the appropriate place. All right, before we take a break, let's just have a look at a couple of little best practices. I will take you through a couple of Docker files a little later, and we'll have a look at a few practical examples after the break as well. But just to run through some final three best practices, try and create what's known as ephemeral containers. Anybody know the definition of ephemeral? It's quick and it's changing. They talk about ephemeral fashion, actually. I looked up the definition to try and give it to you guys today. The one that came up from Webster's Dictionary or whatever it was ephemeral fashion. It changes quickly. The general idea being they can be built up, destroyed, changed as quickly as possible without as little interference as possible. So you don't want these containers that take forever to build up. Because obviously, especially in a production environment, you need to rebuild there for whatever reason, even in the development environment. You don't want to be waiting ages. You want to be up and running as quickly as possible, with little interference and downtime as possible. I mentioned previously as well, where possible, use pre-built base images. The reason being, they are done by the pros. As an example, if I'm building a PHP app, I will use a PHP base image from the start. Because it's built by the PHP team. These guys are experts in their field. They will work their asses off to make sure that they're as small and efficient as possible. It is kind of fun every once in a while to push your own limits and try and build your own, but where possible, use the base. Likewise, making use of Docker ignore files. How many of you guys are familiar with gitignore? Anyone isn't, I'm surprised. But Docker ignore works in pretty much exactly the same way. Coming back to that idea of the smaller the image, the better. When we're copying files into that container so they're being deployed, the more files we copy, obviously the bigger things become. So we have the ability to use Docker ignore to start excluding content. Then we keep that image as small as possible. Coming back then, include only what you need. No more, no less. The smaller the image, the better things are going to be for you in the long term. Coming back to something I mentioned earlier, the idea of multi-stage builds. Back in the day, if you needed a production build and a development build, you generally needed multiple Docker files. One for production, one for development, one for test. No longer, as of one of the newer versions of Docker, you can generally start off with what you would need in production, which is the absolute bare minimum. And then you start off with these different stages, saying, well, for development, I also need Xdebug, and I probably need Composer for PHP environments as well. So add those. All it will do is start at one stage, add what it needs, add the next bit. And likewise simplify our lives so that we only need one Docker file, or at least per container. Likewise, have any of you guys encountered Alpine Linux? One person has. Two. Alpine Linux is not really that well known as something like Ubuntu, CentOS, and so forth. It's an insanely stripped down version of Linux. It excludes a load of the crap that you would normally have with a general Ubuntu server environment or CentOS server environment. It doesn't even come with things like Shadow. You actually have to go and install it. So what you generally find is when you build off or base things off an Alpine image, the image sizes themselves are incredibly small. So generally, what I generally try and do when I'm looking for an image on Docker Hub, if they don't offer an Alpine image, I'll probably use one and try and find someone that does, or I'll try and roll one out myself. Likewise, be aware of the effects, the changes that you will have on your layers and the build process. This is something coming back to that layering idea. Now, when your layers are built, when a change happens, Docker has to go and reevaluate every layer that comes after it, so every instruction that comes after it. So there are general conventions like things that barely ever change, keep them up at the top. They can be stored inside the layer cache. They don't have to be rebuilt over and over again. The things that change quite frequently keep down at the bottom or further down at the bottom. Then if they do change, all those layers before stay exactly as they are. It changes only through what is required, thereby speeding up the actual build time. Likewise, in fact, coming back to, I mentioned the idea previously of the idea that you can have multiple run commands within a single Docker file. Nothing to stop you from doing it, but it's generally considered bad practice. The reason being, every run instruction that you add adds a new layer to your image. So if I had run chown, change my directories, and then another instruction, run to change some other file, and then run to do something else, I've already added 3 different layers. I've now built up on my image size. Again, you want to keep it nice and small. So I'm sure you guys are probably, anyone from a Linux environment is probably familiar with the way that we can start chaining up commands. Using things like and, PILW-IO, if we want my content, and do that. So you can literally start combining your commands into one run command. Keep your run commands to as few as possible to try and keep your image size as small as possible. And likewise, when working with multi-line statements, I'll give you guys a few examples when we come back from our break. When you do have multi-line statements, please just order them alphabetically. It's just common courtesy. it obviously makes it a lot easier for us to follow and say, well, I've installed these PHP modules, the last one happens to be xdebug, so it should probably be the very last line. Because logically, we will be able to follow it far easier. It's not something you have to do, it's just something that's nice to do.
When you said reduce the number of layers where possible, in some previous slides, I got the impression that Docker is doing this for you automatically.
It depends. It doesn't necessarily reduce them. It doesn't do it automatically per se. It does it based entirely on how you structure your instructions. It'll do what it can, but at the end of the day, depending on how you write the Docker file, it will pull up different layers. But cool, let's take a little bit of a break. I cannot read that
We
far.
actually have the break at 12. We will have sandwiches.
Sorry?
At 12, the break.
Time out. 11 Oh, good. So, time flies. Yeah.
Could you also give an example of a use case for Docker ignore?
Sorry?
A use case of Docker ignore.
Oh, Docker ignore. Okay. Tell you what, you can do a project for you. Yeah. Are you familiar with PHP?
No.
Okay, well, PHP basically manages its external libraries using what's known as composer, generally. Now, we end up with this little directory over here called the vendor directory. You generally don't want to copy that file into your working image. You actually, when building up the image, will add an instruction that it dynamically, at build time, builds up the images. So you would add the vendor directory, as an example, to your Docker ignore file. From a JavaScript perspective, same thing with node modules. When you're building up the actual image, you want to install things fresh. So you keep those ones out by adding them to the Docker ignore, and then likewise, as I said, at build time, it will copy them through. In fact, when you look at a Docker file here, that should give you an example of everything. If the only one. Okay, there's no Docker ignore yet, so it's already a work in progress. But just to start running you guys through a Docker file, just to give you guys the first glance, just to give you guys an example of some of these commands that have been built up. You can see an example of our from statements. As I mentioned, from give us the ability to start using a base image to start building things off. So I need a PHP version 3.4, at least for this particular container. I needed PHP 7.3. I wanted to use the CLI. I'm going to be using it for a general workspace to work in. So there's my from command to use my base image. I then got some run commands that I'm using to start running instructions. By the way, you'll notice that I am using Alpine. There are multiple commands inside here, but sometimes you do have to add multiple run commands, unfortunately. But you'll notice, if you have a look at the way that those things have been changed, that run setux could be one command. I could have done the following. Added each one of those as a separate run command. But the downside there, and as I said, each one of those is now adding a brand new layer into the image. The idea of changing them, keeping them to as few as possible. There's less for Docker to evaluate, there's less change that it has to do, so your build time is drastically reduced. Likewise as well, really comes down to that at the end of the day. If you're going to take a little bit further, I'm not going to run through exactly what this is doing, because obviously this is very, very PHP specific, and this is not a PHP lesson. But all it is really doing is taking a base image, in this case PHP CLI. I have some run commands to start adding certain dependencies. As I mentioned, Alpine is pretty stripped down. It doesn't even include things like gzip. It doesn't include things like shadow. So every now and again you need to start adding certain dependencies, and that's the first thing that I kick off with. After that I started installing some PHP extensions, and by the way, one of the other beautiful aspects of Alpine Linux is the ability to create virtual dependencies. You can actually define certain ones. In fact, I have them there. You can see the third run command, run add no cache virtual build depths. That virtual switch and Alpine Linux, you wouldn't find it in Ubuntu, tells you that it is available for deletion at the end of the build of the image. And what I found a lot of the time with Ubuntu especially, I'm going to go and add certain tools and I'm just building up that image size. With Alpine, you can sit back and say, well, okay, cool, I need these for now to build up some of the PHP modules that I need, but I don't need them afterwards. Once I've installed and I've configured all these modules, they can be done away with. So in fact, you'll see right down at the bottom, apkdel build depths. Very, very last instruction, where my cursor happens to be now. I've done all my building. I was running my instructions to get PHP up and running, or my modules up and running, so finally just do away with the build dependencies. It's one of the advantages of the game of Alpine Linux. Anyway, after that, continuing on, as I mentioned, we had a from image. I'm running some instructions to install some modules and to configure this container to start doing what I needed to. From there, start copying over certain files that I'm probably going to need for the image to actually run. And last but not least, or continuing a little bit further actually, in fact here's an example of multi-stage builds. You have the ability to copy specific portions from remote images. I mentioned previously that PHP developers use a tool called Composer to install external libraries. Now, I can add the commands themselves myself to download Composer, likewise install through verifies, checksum, etc., but it's even simpler just to say, well fine, from the latest Composer image on Docker Hub, just pull out Composer, copy it for me. And it will just really do that. It will pull down the full Composer base image, but take out just that layer and just that file and add it for me. So it drastically reduces my own time, and likewise, obviously, my benchmark build size as well. I've also got an environment variable that I set there. Composer, for example, doesn't allow or doesn't really like you to run Composer as a root user. The reason being the files end up being owned by root. So what you end up with is PHP can't execute them. But every now and again you might want to because you've changed the file permissions a little bit later. So I have an env variable there that I'm just using to just override it temporarily. And last but not least, actually, or last two, I set my working directory. Seeing as this, by the way, was based off the PHP CLI image, there was no need for a command or an entry point. If it had been PHP FPM, I could have added in something like this. In order to make sure that PHP, in fact, one more. Just to make sure that 9000, which is the default PHP FPM port, just to make sure that it's exposed, and then likewise, when that container picks up, I have the default command to pull back on to make sure that my service is automatically up and running. Any of you guys encountered Docker Compose? Have any of you guys installed it yet, by the way? Okay, we're actually going to have to do that at some point. I think possibly during our lunch break, I'll have to come down around to the guys that haven't installed it yet, but it does differ from installation to installation. Those on Macs, you guys already have it installed. You should. Those on Windows, to be honest, I'm not entirely sure. I don't work in Windows anymore. Any Linux developers here, or anyone working in Linux at the moment? I would like to know you guys would be. Okay, you guys will need to. So Mac will have it. I'm not entirely sure about Windows. We'll look into that. And yeah, I'll help the Linux guys out as well. But the big thing is, and you'll notice I haven't spent a whole lot of time talking about the Docker commands themselves. The reason being, and it's one of these ideas of being able to make code portable and easy for other developers and other users to understand. So when you see examples of Docker run commands that are publishing ports and exposing environment variables or exposing ports, likewise mounting different volumes, it gets confusing very, very, very fast. Likewise, in fact, if I jump back quickly, you can have a look at the number of Docker commands that you will theoretically need to start learning. And by the way, most of them have so many different permutations in terms of switches or options that can be passed. So that gets a heck of a lot to take in. But look, in reality, there are only a handful of them which we'll actually use on probably on a day-to-day type basis. But obviously, it's a lot to take in. So they came along with a wonderful little tool called Docker Compose, and it's effectively syntactic sugar over Docker. It gives you the ability to start defining things like your services and containers based on images, environment variables, build arguments using a YAML file. You guys familiar with YAML? Yet another markup language. I love that name. By the way, there's actually a Linux shell called Yash. Yet another shell. Discovered that one yesterday. I had a little chuckle. Anyway, so Docker Compose gives you a nice and easier method to start defining and managing all your different containers using their arguments, environment variables, and so forth and so on. Likewise, sorry, just to come back to it, it does simplify the ability, as I mentioned, and when we start doing the pracs, they will be entirely based on Docker Compose, because you will see it does make life a heck of a lot easier, but it gives us the ability to define our networks, which we should do. It gives us the ability to define our bind mounts and volumes, our different containers, the build images therefore, which Docker file we want to use if we need to. Rather than having to sit there in the terminal, as fun as it can be sometimes. But it becomes a heck of a lot easier, and likewise, in fact, I'll show you an example. Here's an example of the Docker Compose file from that same project that I was looking at earlier. Now, jumping ahead, all that I now have, all the different services or containers that I'm going to start building up. They're given names, so in this case, Procure, Nginx, Kona, PHP, FPN, and Workspace.
Jason, can you zoom a little bit?
Ah, sorry. Better?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Right. As I mentioned, I have the ability now, just in a YAML file, to start defining all the different containers. These are normally things that I would actually manually have to type in at the command line, and then obviously probably copy it in and try and explain to someone else. But here, within a single file that I can add into my Git repository, I have a single file where I can now start defining a particular service. Let's have a look at one of my favorite ones, Nginx. That's going to be the name of the container. Actually, not the container name itself, but what we prefer to call it. Likewise, I have a build. So in this case, the build, in this case here, just tells us I need to look inside a certain directory for a Docker file that needs to build it up. I could have also just used the plain image if I wanted to use the default Nginx image, but in some cases, as I mentioned, you may need to start off with a base and start making changes to it. So I added a build context. I've added the depends on statement as well. Nginx needs PHP FPM to run, and at least for this application anyway. So I have service dependency or container dependencies, if you will. Likewise, I have the ports. This is the equivalent of the publish option that I mentioned previously, where we publish ports so that they're available within the host. So in this case, port 80 I could actually probably should have added.
Did you still have to write all of this?
Yeah.
So what was the painful alternative?
Sorry?
What was the painful alternative that was avoided from doing this?
Having to do it manually, literally from a terminal with each Docker run command or build command and so forth. But at the end of the day, what you will find that once you've defined this, the benefits start to become this. It's far easier to share that with another developer. Most of us understand YAML. It's pretty quick and easy to start understanding what's going on inside here, especially when you start spending some time with Docker. Likewise, you can stick this up on GitHub, GitLab, or whatever it might be. Obviously, other developers can pull it just as quickly. You get themselves up and running just as quickly. But what you will actually probably find, especially as developers, you will probably generally use Docker Compose and Docker Compose files to start defining your Docker environments. I far prefer working with this. Anyway, carrying on, just looking a little bit further, let's look at a couple of the others. I don't already pass any environment variables into any of these. I did. And go inside the cure. I passed in some environment variables just to specify that I needed certain parameters to be dynamically passed. I can in fact, last other point. We looked at that output from just me running Docker. But really it's the equivalent of showing you every Docker command that was available that you would normally have to manually type in. That's a heck of a lot nicer to work with. Far less, because what it's actually doing, as I mentioned, it's sugar over Docker, or syntactic sugar. A lot of the commands will run multiple other Docker commands beneath it, but it will have all of the little intricacies for you based on what you've defined inside the Docker Compose file. So I generally find these a heck of a lot easier to work with. In fact, as I said, when we start getting onto the practical examples, we're going to start using Docker Compose rather than Docker itself. Yes?
How compared to previous situation when Docker Compose wasn't enough and you used Docker?
Never.
Okay.
In most cases, in fact, yeah, most of the time I have not encountered a situation where I would rather revert to pure Docker itself. Actually, sorry, I lied. There is only one only, and that is the idea of tagging. When you need to tag an image and push it up to something like Docker Hub, it's easier just to tag it using the default Docker command than Docker Compose. Seeing as, unless I believe you use something like an environment variable, which you then have to start changing dynamically on the fly, it's easier just to use the Docker command. But for everything else, building, running, getting things up and going, it's just far simpler to use Docker Compose. Alright, in fact, like the Docker file syntax, there is a huge amount that can actually go into a Docker file. That's a pretty simple one. They are pretty powerful things. You can define a huge amount inside there. So I'll have a look at a couple of the main ones. Once again, not everything is relevant or important. But continuing a little bit further, alright, the args. First one that we'll have a look at. In fact, sorry, let's start right from the very beginning. Build. Build allows us obviously to specify a build and likewise a context, a Docker file to look for. If I'm not using just a pure base image, and I have my own bespoke Docker file, I'll use something like PILW. Being able to provide arguments that we spoke about earlier. Be able to dynamically, but let's try and find one that uses arguments. There we go. In my Docker file here, I have examples of args and environment variables that I define. In my Docker compose file, I can start using that arg that I mentioned that you can see we had on the screen. This, in fact, I haven't done it here. I'm just thinking that it's been defaulted. I can use the arg option to start parsing in those arg options. So let's give you an example of what I could have done. With our future time. Here. So all that we'll do now, in fact, in my Docker file, sorry, you'll notice that I had a default value. If an arg is not passed, then it'll just use the default. If I pass it in by Docker compose, it overrides the default. And then likewise, I actually still have the ability to pass it in using an environment variable as well. But coming back then to our compose syntax, cache prompts kind of a newer one. It gives you the ability to start specifying specific images where you want to pull from cache. And obviously, if we can pull from cache like anything, the quicker things can start building up. Likewise, the small things start becoming as well. Another one that I'm quite fond of. Actually, command gives us the ability to provide the equivalent to CMD that I typed in the Docker file earlier. So rather than providing the Docker file, if one isn't available, I can use command to specify a command to run if one isn't currently available. Environment's always a good one. Okay, Elasticsearch. I've got an Elasticsearch image open. I want to go and change the HTTP port or the port that it's using. So in fact, I've got my environment already available. But it's just a simple instruction to say, well, there we go, there's the environment variable. I pass it in, it gets passed into the Docker file or the Docker container at runtime, and things happen nice and dynamically. But as mentioned, I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time. In fact, sorry, the last one I should probably define are things like the networks and the ports. Do I have any defined here? Don't either. As I mentioned, Docker Compose lets you control pretty much everything that you would normally need to define using a Docker command, including our network, which we mentioned as a complex topic. But in this case here, I defined two different networks. I had my front end and I had my back end network. Just two little virtual networks that I created, likewise with specific drivers and example of environment variables, but we will touch on those a little bit later. Likewise, actually, I defined my volumes there as well for persistent storage. You guys remember I mentioned that I like to use named volumes rather than anonymous volumes. I've got an example there where I created a named volume called MariahDB. Then at least if I need to go and inspect my volumes to make sure that they're there, or I want to go and rinse it out, I know which one I'm rinsing out. That I don't accidentally rinse the wrong one out. And likewise, the anonymous volume names can be a bit of a pain in the ass to look through. And last but not least, before we move on to something else, just the ports. As mentioned, we have expose, which allows us to expose ports to containers. But likewise, if we need to expose ports to the host, we have the ports option as well. So I can make port 80 available so that we can actually start running things properly. Oh, the last point, by the way, sorry, well, last 2 points. We do have the ability to use env files. I'm going to have you guys manually creating one fairly soon. I can actually show you one now quickly as well, but they work pretty much like environment files in most languages. How many of you guys have worked with Laravel? Or Symfony for that matter? You're probably familiar with the env file that normally ships with Laravel. Pretty much exactly the same thing. Gives you the ability to start defining variables that you can then pass into through Docker Compose. By the way, in terms of env files, please don't ever store them in Git. This is the kind of place where you want to store things like your MySQL passwords and so forth. Obviously, you don't want to put it directly inside Docker Compose, but that needs to go out to source control so that you can share it with your developers. But if you need a password, you can add maybe a placeholder and XYZ developer will set his own. You would normally create what's known as a dist version. In fact, our Laravel developer over there is probably familiar with it. You get env example that you normally copy over and say, well, there we go, now I've got a working env file to work with. You start editing and changing the values to suit your own particular needs. You set your own password, but it is kept out of source control because that is where you're going to start placing secret information that you obviously do not want other people to get hold of. And my last point, at least for this, the syntax changes pretty often. We're now at 3.7, I believe, which is the latest. When I started, it was, I think it was actually 3 had just come out. It changes pretty rapidly, so it is something that you are going to have to unfortunately keep up with. But thankfully, the documentation gets updated pretty regularly and pretty well as well. This is actually just really one of the last 2 slides, and then I actually want to start take lunch and then start doing some practical with it. Right, just talking about the environment files. As I mentioned, they allow us to provide dynamic environment variables to pass in to Docker Compose and likewise to Docker in general. Pretty simple syntax to follow. I've given you an example, at least of the slide of what it might look like. And likewise, how I might use it inside something like an instruction or inside a Docker file. You guys also saw some examples from what I was through opening up in PHP Storm as well. And as previously mentioned, they should never be committed to source control, because that is where you're going to have things like your passwords, your port numbers, etc., etc. So rather keep those out. As I mentioned, you'll have what is known as a dist file, which has placeholder information that you would have to fill in. A little bit of setup time, but at least a little bit more security. And last slide, I promise you now. After that, we'll take a break for lunch, and when we come back, we can start doing some actual breaks, and I will rehash a whole lot of this. People have been asking about Kubernetes, and specifically from a PILW-IO environment, because we're going to be working quite a lot with the PILW-IO setup fairly soon. Is Kubernetes actually really worth it? The simple answer, probably not. The reason being, PILW-IO, as it's being rolled out, pretty much is doing practically most of what Kubernetes does already. Likewise, obviously, look, certain apps might require it, depending on how things are structured. But for simple apps, the image itself pretty much describes it pretty well. You have this massive infrastructural tool that's handling something so small. So in most cases, it's probably going to be below Don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking Kubernetes. It just really depends entirely on your environment. I know a company like Redongo would probably benefit from Kubernetes because their infrastructure is pretty intense and pretty complex. So yeah, maybe they would. But if you're going to be publishing just a basic blog or a simple site that's running on a single virtual host, there's no point. In which case there it's overbloated. So it does depend on the situation, but especially as more and more features from PILW-IO being rolled out, it's becoming less and less of an important feature. Right, let's break for lunch. And when we come back, I'm going to start leading you guys through some cracks.